I was part of the Greek Orthodox. As a kid, I wasn't super active in that. I was going every Sunday, at least on and off, maybe. I mean, I do remember, Greek school, going to Sunday school. It was less than a year. It was consistent, I think, for a while there, but it was definitely not more than a year. And we definitely did, church on special occasions, holidays, that type of thing. My first wife did convert to Greek Orthodox for me, and we had our wedding in the church. So even though I may not have been super active on a every day, every week Sunday basis, it definitely was a part of my identity growing up. That's who I was, and that's what I believed. And I could sit there in church and look at all the iconography and the stained glass windows, and I would sit there, and it was funny because I'd always wait for Jesus to appear on the altar or something. I can remember that vividly. And it was like, he never did. All that chanting, all that incense, all that, and yet he never appeared. I thought the priest might be conjuring him or something, but never happened. I don't remember ever being bored. I mean, I think one thing about about the Greek services are they are beautiful. There's a lot of the chanting and the singing, priest walking up and down the pews, swinging the incense burners, I guess. Of course, they have you constantly sit down, stand up, kneel, sit down, stand up, kneel. So you don't have much time to fall asleep in the pews by any means. And at one point, I even thought I wanted to be a priest. I was kind of like wishing I could, be an altar boy and be up there with the priest. It seemed so important until I kind of figured out my teenage years that it wasn't for the right reasons that I wanted to be a priest. It was because of the respect and power that a priest had over the parish. He was a respected man in the community. In my 20s, I was still somewhat active. I mean, sometimes when I felt my life was out of control, I would go to church. The job I had at the time, I had to work Sundays. I even told them at the time that I wasn't going to work Sunday morning. I was going to go to church. I'd come in at around noon. So it was kind of on and off. That's when I was living here in Utah. I moved to Colorado for 4 years, and I probably started becoming less active there because I lived in Fort Collins. The nearest Greek Orthodox Church was either in Cheyenne, Wyoming, or in Denver. I think I became frustrated with the church when I was, in my late 20s. I think my first big schism with the church was when my cousin committed suicide. The church frowned upon that they wouldn't allow his body to be brought into the church for services. A priest wouldn't come to the graveside because he'd taken his life and he'd also been cremated. The church wanted nothing to do with it. And I was just appalled that this absolutely kind soul, all of a sudden, because he did this one thing wrong, the church turned their back on him. And it wasn't even wrong. I mean, he was probably just, for whatever reason, he was too sensitive for this world. That just really pissed me off. And I lost a lot of respect at that point for the priests. As you walk through this world and you begin to see that your experiences, what you can taste, feel, touch, see, hear, they don't align with the Bible. I'm a voracious reader, and I'm very interested in things that are science. I began to realize that a lot of the events in the Bible, there's no way in hell they could be real, because everything that's in there could now be explained by geology and science and weather patterns. And then with people, the Bible says this about this kind of people and that about that kind of people. And that wasn't my experiences. I mean, I don't understand how people can be so anti-LGBTQ and justify it with the Bible, because my experience with gay people has always been absolutely wonderful. It's not been anything outside of my experience with anyone who's straight. Good people are good people, bad people are bad people. It doesn't matter who they're living with, who they're in love with, or whatever. So none of that jived. There was a huge conflict between the church teachings and my real life experience living. There's still a role of a woman in the household. It is, a woman has this role, a man has this role. It is traditional biblical roles of men and women. I've never subscribed to that. I mean, I was raised by a very strong woman, and she did great things. She did a lot of great things with her life. I don't see my mom ever fitting into the traditional roles of what the church wanted her to do. And I know that my grandmother was the same way. She had big plans for her life, and they were not put on hold. They were completely dead stop, because she had to become a Greek wife, have Greek babies, make Greek food. There you go. When my mom passed away in 2002, she was cremated also. She didn't have a church funeral because there was no body to take into the church up on the altar and have a service. But the priest did come to the gravesite, and it was actually the same priest which I'd known since I was a kid. He was my algebra 1 and 2 teacher, and he came to the gravesite, and I met him at the car. He looks across the cemetery there, and he says, "Where's the casket?" And I said, "Well, my mom, her wishes were to be cremated, and so we don't have a casket." He looks at me for a second, and he says, "We can work with that." And completely opposite experience of what happened when my cousin took his life and how the church treated that. So, I mean, there was some redeeming there, as far as there was some redemption right there in the church, at least realizing that it's not always the church, but individuals that interpret doctrine inside the church. And compassion, again, this priest just had more compassion for the situation than the other priest did. So was that the church, or was that a man that was speaking or thought he was speaking for the church and God or some deity? I think you still want to believe in something. You still want to believe in a higher power. There's some comfort in that for sure. My second wife considered herself Wiccan, so I researched and dabbled in paganism, Wicca, for a while. Wicca is a relatively recent religion based on paganism. It's an earth-based religion. If I'm correct, Wicca is only probably 70, 80 years old. Maybe not even that. It is an earth-based religion. So, all your worship revolves around the earth itself, earth-based events, the solstices. You can have a lot of gods and goddesses. Goddesses are just as important, if not more important. The earth is looked at as a female rather than a male. Wicca and most pagan religions celebrate the feminine power, the feminine force, but also with an equal male force. You have the green man, which is typically shown as a tree. That's a masculine. And then you have Mother Earth, who's feminine, and they balance each other out. I think that kind of drew me to it too, because it was more of a egalitarian faith. In Christianity, there's people take on or identify with saints. And in the pagan religions and Wicca, people identify with a certain god of the old, whether that's a Greco-Roman or it's Norse, and they mix them all together. I mean, they don't see any conflict between, say, Zeus and Odin. They're both just as valid. I might need Odin for this. I might identify with Zeus for that. I see that in the pagan religions and Wicca that it's really empowering for a lot of women because it does celebrate the powerful feminine. I came out of the Greek Orthodox faith and into something else because I still wanted to believe in a greater power than myself. People want to believe in heaven. People want to believe in an afterlife. No one wants to think they're never going to see their loved ones again when they pass away. And that, when you pass away, all your ancestors and your mom, your dad, your brother that passed away before, your sister, whatever, they're all going to be there to greet you at the pearly gates of heaven. So how can you tell me that my dog's life is any less valid than a human's life? Why is a dog not going to heaven? Why is that deer I just shot not going to heaven, or that duck or rabbit, or how about that mouse that just got killed by a hawk? Is he going to heaven? And a hawk, is he going to heaven? It's very arrogant to think that for some reason our life is worth more than any other life, especially when genetically we are not that separate from many other species on this planet. It's just minor tweaks. Great apes that are 99% of our DNA, except for 1 or 2 genes that are different, and we ended up differently. And again, science. Science is one of the things that really made me drift away. One thing that a lot of Christians love to try to trip you up with is, the Big Bang Theory. Okay, well, where did the Big Bang Theory come from? There had to be a God that started that spark. No, there doesn't. It's not my job to prove to you that God doesn't exist. It's your job to prove he does. We can't see, touch, taste, feel this deity, this entity. No one believes in Santa Claus. No one believes in Spider-Man. But yet God, who's just as fictitious as Santa Claus or Spider-Man, somehow I have to prove to you that God doesn't exist. But I don't have to prove to you that Santa Claus doesn't exist. The establishment, my parents, the church, society, lied to me about Santa Claus. Why aren't they lying to me about God? I can't see him either, or Jesus Christ. Is this all a big lie? I mean, you've lied to me about this. Now, what about that? It's the same thing in a way. And honestly, I wish Santa Claus did exist. At least Santa goes around the world one day a year and makes every kid's life better for just a little while. I mean, if I could have a Santa Claus or a God or Jesus Christ, I would prefer Santa Claus, because Santa Claus actually tries to make kids' lives better. And if God and Jesus do exist, why don't they stop what's going on right now in the Gaza Strip with all these children dying, being bombed? Why are kids dying of cancer? How can a compassionate deity allow kids to suffer so? Santa Claus wants to take away their suffering. I know too much now to believe like that. I mean, how could I go to church and believe the earth was created in 6 days, and on the seventh day God rested? How can you go to church and believe in the story of Noah's Ark when you know how many actual species there are? You know, in the time the Bible was written, that was their whole world. That where they lived was the existence of. They thought that was all the world that existed. It's easy to create a story like that. Two of every animal. Well, that's great because you live in a very small portion of the world. I mean, Christians can't even agree with each other. First of all, you have the evangelicals. You have the really devout Christians who think that everyone else is wrong, including the other. You know, the Protestants think the Catholics are wrong. The evangelicals think they're both. You know, think both of those are wrong, and the Baptists are wrong, and the Lutherans and the Seventh-day Adventists. You know, they all pick and choose their portion of the Bible, which defines their particular faith. You know, and even the Greek Orthodox Church. I mean, the Greek Orthodox Church is not shy about saying they're the only true church. They can't all be true churches, you know. And I've asked Christians that when they've challenged me on it. It's like, okay, so you say yours is the only true church. Well, your neighbor, the Catholic, says his is the only true church. The Muslims, the Islam, you know, they think they're the only true religion. The Hindus have how many gods? So how can you say they believe just as much as you do? So either all those gods exist or none of them exist. It's very dangerous. Anytime you start making laws based on a faith, then there are people who can be marginalized, and you're no longer, you know, America, land of the free, home of the brave. You're land of the free for some, but not all. I feel that people hide behind religion way too much to justify their own biases and bigotry. I just don't see any evidence of a higher power. And if there is, it certainly is not a kind, compassionate higher power. I truly believe I'm an atheist. I identify as an atheist. But, you know, at the same time, I also identify as a Buddhist. In the last decade or so, I've really studied Buddhism. And I like that because it's a philosophy and not really a religion. I mean, it's treated as a religion. You know, it's more of a way to live and a way to live a moral, ethical life. And you're responsible for that. It's not some devil or some God, and you're not going to pray to someone, and you're not going to go have someone absolve you of your sins. I mean, you have to deal with your own sins on your own. You know, just to do better today than you did yesterday. And that's what really drew me to the philosophies of Buddhism. I meditate when I can. I'm not consistent with it. You know, and I wish I should meditate more. That just somehow doesn't fit into my daily routine, and I just haven't made it enough of a priority that I actually carve, you know, 30 minutes out of my day every day to meditate. I do find solace in that. I mean, there definitely is a lot of comfort when I do meditate. It definitely, you know, slows down my mind and allows me to think more clearly about things. Although that doesn't mean I'm, even as an atheist, that I'm not full of gratitude. I mean, it may seem weird, but I do say some words of gratitude every morning. For me, a meaningful life is one that's lived well. You die with more friends than you ever thought possible. You know, he with the most friends wins. An ethical life, a moral life. You leave someone better than you found them. Have you done that? I think that a meaningful life consists of family. I want to be that person who's so well liked that even the Undertaker is starting to see me go. Maybe leave some kind of legacy. You know, I mean, it's like writers and musicians. You know, they write books. Those books are forever. The music they make is forever. They've left some kind of legacy, something that says, I was here on this earth. And most people never have that. Most people, they're born, they grow up, they get a job, they work 30 years, 40 years, they retire, they have kids in the meantime, and they die. And other than an obituary and a headstone, there is no evidence whatsoever that person ever existed. I think some things are just absolutely timeless, and books are one of those things, and music. People change, but music is something that connects us all. It's a thread that connects all of us. And it doesn't matter whether that music was written in the 18th century or the 17th century or today. It still resonates with people. It still pushes emotion, creates emotion.